The air in the dimly lit lounge was thick with the scent of expensive bourbon and something far more intoxicating, her perfume, a sharp note of jasmine that seemed to cling to the back of my throat. I wasn't supposed to be looking at her, but in a room full of people, she was the only thing in focus. When our eyes met, the world around us fell into a muffled blur. She didn't look away. Instead, she tilted her head, a slow, predatory smile tugging at the corner of her lips that made my pulse thrum against my collar. She moved toward me with a deliberate feline grace, the silk of her dress whispering against her skin. Before I could find my voice, she was there, stepping into my personal space until the heat radiating from her body was undeniable. She reached out, her fingers grazing the cuff of my shirt before sliding upward, a touch so light it was almost a suggestion, yet it felt like a brand. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a dull roar in my ears that drowned out the ambient music. "You look like you're holding your breath," she murmured, her voice a low, honeyed velvet that vibrated in the small gap between us. She leaned in closer, her breath warm against my ear, the tip of her nose brushing my temple. The tension was a physical weight, a charged wire stretched to the breaking point. I could see the golden flecks in her irises and the slight tremble in her hand, a mirror to my own sudden, inexplicable nervousness. She took a step back, just enough to force me to chase her gaze, her eyes searching mine with an intensity that felt like she was peeling back layers I'd kept hidden for years. Her hand moved from my arm to my chest, resting right over my racing heart. She let out a soft, knowing hum, her thumb tracing a small circle over the fabric of my suit. "Is it always this loud?" she teased, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. For a second, I believed it. I believed the heat, the pull, the way she seemed to see me. I leaned down, my lips inches from hers, caught in the gravity of a moment that felt like the beginning of everything. But then her smile shifted, just a fraction, and the warmth in her eyes was replaced by a flash of something cold and calculating. "I have a secret," she breathed, her fingers tightening on my lapel as she pulled me down to hear the words that would change everything. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered, her lips almost brushing my skin, "but secrets are the only things that feel real anymore." The weight of her words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the electric hum of the lounge. As she pulled away, the cold air rushing between us felt like a physical blow. We retreated to a corner booth, the shadows swallowing the edges of our conversation. This wasn't just a chance encounter. It was the culmination of months of a slow, agonizing slide to a precipice I hadn't realized we were standing on. To the outside world, we were the gold standard, but beneath the surface, the foundation was eroding. I remembered the early days, the way she used to look at me like I was the only person who could hear the music in her head. Now, that gaze often felt like a searchlight looking for flaws I didn't know I was hiding. There were nights when we lay inches apart in a bed that felt like an ocean, the silence between us so heavy it was hard to breathe. I'd reach for her hand, and she'd let me hold it, but her fingers would remain limp, the ghost of the woman who used to interlace her life with mine. "You've been distant, Elias," she said, her voice steady now, devoid of the playfulness from moments ago. She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. The touch was familiar, yet there was a new, sharp edge to it. "You think I don't notice the way you watch the door when you're with me? Like you're waiting for someone or something to save you?" The accusation stung, because it was half true. I wasn't looking for an exit. I was looking for a sign that she was still there. I watched her now, the way the amber light caught the sharp line of her jaw. Even in the middle of a brewing storm, the attraction was a visceral, tethering force. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a jagged edge. "I'm not looking for the door. I'm looking for us. Where did we go?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she picked up her glass, the ice clinking in nervous rhythm. "Maybe we didn't go anywhere," she murmured, her eyes dark and unreadable. She stood up, the movement fluid and haunting. She didn't leave, though. She walked around the table and sat beside me, her thigh pressing against mine, a bold reclamation of space. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a fleeting second, the cracks seemed to vanish. I closed my eyes, inhaling the scent of her hair, desperately wanting to believe the intimacy wasn't a mask. "Don't hate me for what comes next," she whispered into the crook of my neck, her hand sliding into mine and squeezing with a desperate, crushing force. The silence following her plea was broken by the sharp vibration of her phone on the marble tabletop. The screen lit up, no name, just a string of numbers, and I watched her entire demeanor shift. The softness in her shoulders vanished, replaced by a rigid, iron-like composure. She didn't pick it up, but she didn't look away from it either. "Who is that?" I asked, the words tasting like ash. She let out a hollow laugh, finally meeting my eyes. "Does it matter? You've already decided what the answer is." The jealousy hit me then, a hot, jagged surge that bypassed logic. I reached out, my hand closing firmly on hers on the table, pinning her phone beneath our joined palms. The contact was electric, a volatile mix of the desire that still burned for her and the suspicion that was freezing my blood. "It matters to me because I'm still here, and I don't know who the hell you're looking at when you think I'm asleep." The air between us grew thin, charged with a forbidden energy. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in closer, her foreheads touching. I could feel her eyelashes brush against my skin. It was an agonizing proximity, the kind that makes you want to scream and forgive everything at once. Her hand flipped beneath mine, her fingers locking with mine in a grip that felt less like love and more like a struggle for survival. "You want to know about temptation, Elias?" she hissed, her voice a jagged whisper. "It's not some stranger in a bar. It's sitting right here, wanting to touch you while knowing I'm about to tear your world apart." She stood up abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet lounge. I followed her out into the cool night air, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. We stopped by the edge of the darkened terrace, tucked away from the prying eyes of the street. She turned to face me, her back against the railing, the wind whipping her hair across her face. She looked broken, yet dangerously beautiful. I stepped into her space, my hands finding her waist, pulling her flush against me. It was a desperate, primal move, a claim on something I felt slipping through my fingers. For a moment, she melted into me, her hands clutching the back of my neck, her lips hovering just a heartbeat away from mine. "Tell me it's not true," I pleaded against her skin. She pulled back just enough to look me in the eye, a single tear tracing a path through her makeup. "I call it love," she whispered, her lips trembling. "But I think you're right. I think you're going to call it something else." She reached into her small clutch, pulling out a key I didn't recognize and pressing it into my palm. The key was cold, a heavy piece of brass that felt like a lead weight in my pocket as I followed her to a secluded apartment on the edge of the city, a place I never knew existed. The elevator ride was a suffocating infinity. We stood in the corner, the mirrored walls reflecting a version of us that looked fractured, ghost-like. Every time the lift jolted, our shoulders brushed, sending a jolt of unwanted electricity through my spine. The pull was still there, a cruel magnetic force that didn't care about the lies. When the door to the penthouse clicked open, the lights remained off. The city skyline bled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, blue shadows across the minimalist furniture. She didn't turn on the lamps. She just walked to the center of the room and waited. "Why are we here?" I asked, my voice echoing in the hollow space. She didn't answer with words. She walked back toward me, her heels clicking a rhythmic countdown on the hardwood. She stopped so close I could hear the erratic hitch in her breathing. In the dim light, her eyes were bottomless pools of obsidian. She reached up, her cool fingers sliding behind my neck, drawing me down into her orbit. It was an invitation and a trap, and I was walking into it with my eyes wide open. The kiss was desperate, a collision of teeth and tongue that tasted of salt and secrets. It wasn't the sweet embrace of a lover. It was the frantic clawing of two people trying to find a truth that no longer existed. My hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer until there was no air left between us, no room for doubt, only the raw, pulsing heat of the moment. For a heartbeat, the betrayal didn't matter. The cracks didn't matter.
There was only the scent of her jasmine and the frantic beat of two hearts out of sync. She pulled back just an inch, her lips swollen, her gaze burning into mine. "I wanted you to feel this one last time," she whispered, her voice breaking, "before you see what's behind that door." She pointed to a heavy oak door at the end of the hallway, a sliver of light leaking from the bottom. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. I turned it, the hinges groaning, and as the door swung open, the breath left my lungs. The light from the room was blinding after the darkness of the hallway. I stepped inside, my heart hammering a hollow rhythm against my ribs, expecting to see a lover, a man waiting in the shadows to claim what I thought was mine. But the room wasn't a bedroom. It was an office, sterile and cold, walls lined with monitors and cork